This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate. This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate. This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Everybody can find a seat if we need more. There's still room. Hey, Dennis, how are you? We're missing Sarah. There she is. Mark, where's Mark? We're missing Mark. So we are going to get started. In like 30 seconds. Marco? So are we on live stream? We are on live stream, so this is going to be live streamed, I believe on my Facebook, my state page, and judging from this crowd, this is awesome. So thank you very much for being here to talk about Senate Bill 45. I'm Anthony Portantino, one of the joint authors of SB 45. So welcome to the wonderful Descanso Gardens. I want to give a shout out to Julianne Rook, our Executive Director of Descanso, and her team. Let's give her a big shout out. She's in the back. And just so you all know, after the town hall, y'all have free admission to Descanso Gardens. So go enjoy the gardens and have a great day. It's a beautiful day outside, isn't it? So who's a newcomer to Descanso? So a bunch of you have never been here before, so please go. We are joined by a number of elected officials. I want to give a shout out to Sharon Springer, the mayor of Burbank, who's here. Dennis Bertone, Councilmember San Dimas is here. Ann Hickenbottom, representing Assemblymember Holden's office, is here. Silvio Lanzas, the Glendale Fire Chief, is here. We have Andy, who's a representative of Councilmember Paul Koretz's office, is here. We have Jared DeGonia representing Supervisor Barger. We have Councilmember Paula Devine from Glendale, who's here. Did I miss any other elected officials? Diana Malmood from South Pass is here. Frank Quintero from Glendale is here, council members. Did I miss, what? I got Sharon Springer. See Sharon, see how Arda was? Arda was like making sure I didn't forget you. Yay, Arda. She was first. So welcome to this important discussion. I see Glendale Fire Chief in the back. We have lots of emergency response personnel here. We've got environmentalists. We've got several nonprofit organizations. We also had a table for the Tuna Canyon Detention Coalition. And I was told that Mark Sturdivant is watching us today. So, right, Jeanette? So Mark is here in spirit. So we also want to give a shout out to our good friend. Greg Brown from La Cañada is here as well. How could I miss Greg Brown? And we're going to get a welcome from the mayor of La Cañada, the Honorable Len Peroni is here. So Len, come on up and give us a welcome and welcome us to your wonderful city.
All right, thank you. Thank you. As you know, I'm Len Peroni, and I'm the mayor of La Cañada. Flint Ridge. It's my privilege to welcome you all to the beautiful Descanso Gardens. Today, this topic is timely considering how important it is to finance projects to things like wildfire prevention, safe drinking water, drought preparation. I kind of got this out of in the right time here, but I'm honored to introduce our host. He's a super hard working and effective legislator. He's an advocate for our communities, especially as today, such as SB 45. I'm pleased to present my friend and mentor, Senator Anthony Portantino.
Let's give a big shout out to Led Peroni. Let's just give him a big shout out. I do like his mother better than him. She's my buddy. No, the Peroni family's wonderful, and he's doing a great job as mayor, and, we're just pleased that you're here to share some words. And some of you, me too, yeah. Can I share? So Len has been dealing with some health issues, and so it's great to see him up and to just say how important this is that he was here. So God bless you, Len, and thank you for being here. Let's give him some noise. So we've got a great group of folks who are going to share with us about SB 45. We got James Barber from the Pro Tem's office. We've got Joe Edmonston, who needs no introduction. I will tell you, Joe says he's my mentor, but he says I don't mentor Anthony enough because he doesn't do as much as I want him to do. So he picks on me, and we love each other. But Joe is a legend, and we have the Santa Monica Mountains to enjoy and celebrate because of all of his efforts. We have Sarah Rascone from the Upper LA River and Tributaries Working Group. Many of you here have worked on that important work, and one of the reasons why SB 45 is so important is we have a plan, and we now need the resources to implement that plan, and that's what SB 45 is going to help us do. Mark Stanley from the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, our conservancy to the east, is really important to the San Gabriel Valley, and so we're going to hear from him. And we have Susanna Reyes from the Sierra Club, who is here to answer questions on behalf of the Sierra Club. So let's give a big round of applause for our panel. And just to share a little bit, SB 45 is critical to the future of California, both from a fire safety perspective, but also to have resources. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have the town hall is there's a split in Sacramento on whether we should have it locally driven through the activist community, through the cities, and through the conservancies, or whether Sacramento should dictate how a parks bond gets implemented. I favor working through the local conservancies and giving them the resources, because all of you and all of your cities sit on those bodies, and it's just a better way to program the dollars locally. And so I want to highlight the strength of SB 45, so as it works through the process, you all know why we're fighting so hard for it. So we're going to start with James Barber from the Pro Tem's office to do a quick overview. As you see up there, there are three authors of SB 45, Senator Allen, myself, and Senator Stern. And the bill has passed the Senate and is moving into the Assembly. We tried to get this through last year, but the inter-house communication was not as strong as it needed to be. But we're hoping this year that we're going to have success, get it on the ballot, and help all of our projects that are so laudable throughout the entire state of California. Obviously, today a big focus is going to be on our district, and so our conservancies can walk our cities and our advocates through how we're going to do a call for projects, how we're going to implement this going forward. So, James, you're first up. I'm going to bring him over. I reserve the right to jump in, so I'm going to take his seat, and there's a microphone over there too, but I'm going to let James do the first presentation. So let's hear James. And again, this is being live streamed at home. Thank you if you're joining us at home. If you didn't make it, you're going to miss going to the gardens when we're all over. And thank you all for being out. Just the fact that this is a Friday morning and we got a room full of 100 people here just shows how important preserving our open space and having fire protection is for all of you. So thank you all for being out, and I want to thank my staff for working so diligently, and the Senate caucus for giving us the resources to be here. You all have fact sheets on the bills and also on the big picture. So I'm going to turn it over to James to walk us through our first presentation, and I'll be back in a second. Thanks.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is a really incredible turnout. I'm very pleased to see how much energy there is in the room for climate resilience. Thank you, Senator Portantino, not just for bringing us all together today, but for his leadership with Senate Bill 45 and generally speaking as a leader to protect our environment. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everyone else for being here. I want to talk about the why. Why are we here? What is resilience? Because I think resilience is often a word, it's a catch-all phrase. It means different things to different people. But to me, it's about the future. It's about our health. It's also about our fiscal health as a state. And we know that this is about the future, but the impacts are here now. And we're feeling it in many different ways. And I want to just zoom out and give some perspective about the costs of climate impacts that we've already been experiencing, because oftentimes people think that this is a hypothetical risk that we need to prepare for, but really it's an immediate threat that we're already dealing with and we're already feeling. So since 2000, climate disasters have cost Americans more than $1 trillion, $1.3 trillion. Just in the last decade, the cost of weather and climate-related disasters has been $800 billion. Now, to put that in perspective, because these are big numbers, that's the size of the bailout, the TARP bailout that we had to invest to help our economy avoid a depression. So this is on the scale of war and emergency economic response. So just to give you that figure. So, and it's also nearly as much as we spent in a decade of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So SB 45 is a $5.5 billion bond measure. It would put a bond on the November 2020 ballot. And I like to say that it's an ounce of prevention. It's not a silver bullet, but we know that every dollar that we spend on prevention saves costs in the future. And the United Nations has done a report that found that, in fact, every dollar that we invest in prevention and climate resilience and infrastructure in particular saves $6 in costs down the line. So as you can see, if we could go to the next slide. So this slide gives you a rough breakdown, an overview of what we're talking about when we talk about the resilience bond. So as you can see, wildfire prevention is a huge priority for the state of California. It's a huge priority for the Senate. We've been experiencing the impacts of wildfire across the state, in every corner of the state. And I want to actually give you some more context about the cost of climate disasters. So, because they've been growing in each decade since the 1980s. In the 1980s, we averaged about $3 billion disasters across the United States each year. In every decade that has increased. In the most recent 3-year period, we've experienced 15 separate billion-dollar disasters each year, and that's just events that are more than $1 billion. So they could be up to $20 billion, for a single event, and we've averaged more than $100 billion in costs per year. So as you all know, California in the last 10 years has experienced a historic 5-year drought. The deadliest and most destructive wildfires in our history, including the Camp Fire, which was both the deadliest and most destructive, but also the Tubbs, the Thomas, the Woolsey. We can go on and on. We've all felt the impacts. 15 of the 20 most destructive wildfires in our history have happened since 2000. We've seen mudslides, we've seen flooding, we've seen erosion, coastal erosion from sea level rise. And as I said, SB 45 is not a silver bullet, but it's a down payment on our future. And we know that this investment is critical now. We need the resources now. We're feeling the impacts now. We can't afford to wait. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So the LA River, of course, is a topic near and dear to the hearts of many folks in the region. As a Northern California boy, I'm not an expert in the LA River, but I'm grateful that we have real experts in the room that will discuss this topic further. But as you can see, the LA River is a priority in this bond measure, and that's thanks to the leadership of people like Senator Portantino. $140 million for between the upper and the lower LA River. That will go a long way to increasing not only access and not just beautification. It's not about making the river look pretty. It's about making it a space that serves a natural ecosystem function where people can, and a recreational function. So it has the social and the actual environmental benefits that this money will help us get to. So as I mentioned, we have some real experts in the room that can talk more about the LA River. I'm going to just briefly cover that, and I'm going to move on, if we can, to fire and climate resilience, as I've already touched on. So, as I mentioned, and you saw on the previous slide, $2.2 billion for wildfire resilience and for community impacts. And I want to talk a little bit about this because folks who remember when the Camp Fire happened, I know it was remote for many of you who live in Southern California. But the smoke from that fire could be seen from satellites covering most of the state of California. Over 1 million school children missed multiple days of school. 1 in 6 kids in the state of California missed multiple days of school because of the smoke from that fire, toxic smoke that causes asthma and many other heart conditions, exacerbates emphysema, a whole wide range of impacts. The economic impact of that fire is almost impossible to measure when you think about the lost days of work and the lost days of school that occurred as a result of that fire. So, has anyone here experienced a public safety power shutoff? I'm assuming many have, more so in Northern California, but many folks have. We've all experienced the dirty air. We've all heard and experienced the power shutoffs. And has anyone here received a non-renewal notice for their fire insurance? I'm assuming many have, because I know folks in my family have. Now, these are the impacts of climate change. You don't think necessarily of a blackout as being associated with climate change or an insurance issue as necessarily being associated with climate change, but these are the impacts we're feeling. These are the manifestations of climate change that are happening here and now. And, I kind of already mentioned the growing intensity of the wildfire challenge, but I just want to emphasize that the annual burn area in the state of California has increased 5-fold since 1980. So we see as temperatures rise, as our wildlands become hotter, drier, we're seeing these fires grow faster and endanger more lives and property. So as you can see, the bond measure allocates $170 million to the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. These are our expert folks on the ground who are familiar with every nook and cranny of these wild lands. And these will help us remove the tinder that often keeps fires burning. It'll help us just improve the ecosystem services of this community, of these wild lands, and also the recreational value to keep them, not only to keep them from burning, but to keep them healthy and thriving, and to keep them supporting the species that call it their home. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I'm sure many folks in the room, I think I'm preaching to the choir here because you're here at a climate resilience town hall in the middle of the day on a Friday, but so I'm sure many of you are familiar with the urban heat island effect, but many of our communities are, they resemble concrete jungles today, and when you have a lot of asphalt and concrete, we know that those surfaces absorb heat, and so it causes temperatures in our densely populated urban areas to be several degrees warmer than a comparable community with more green space. So the benefits of green space are many, and traditionally I don't think we've valued them appropriately. We've had to measure them in new ways to assign them the value that they really have. But that's one of the values of green space, is that not only as a recreational space, as a place where our kids can gather and be healthy and play and be outside, it also is shown to make our communities safer. When our kids and our communities have a space to go have a birthday party or to play sports, all the various things that we do outside is proven to make to improve our lives. So you all know this again, but I think one of the incredible opportunities that we have with this resilience bond is to kind of break down those concrete jungles and replace them with urban forests that are healthy, multi-benefit spaces that can just serve incredible diversity of needs in our communities. So as you can see, the bond measure makes this a priority. $395 million for greening, urban greening in the places that we need them the most. And the local Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy will be playing a leading role in those efforts. If we go to the next space, please. Next slide, sorry. So I kind of, oh, did we already? Okay, great. This kind of shows you what the money will be applied to. So, and I kind of covered some of these topics already, but I guess we can move on to the other wildfire benefits. And I've been hammering wildfires, I think, because they're one of the most immediate threats that we face. We face an array of challenges with climate change, but I think wildfires are one of the most vivid. You know, they're visible in ways that some of the other impacts aren't. And this bond measure reflects that. It treats it as a priority. $655 million. The money in this bond measure will help us not only prepare for and prevent the wildfire challenges that we're experiencing, but it'll increase. First of all, there's many different ways that we attack this challenge. Pre-positioning with wildfire resources, staffing, new helicopters, new engines, new intelligence. And when I say intelligence, is that we're using new tools of the information economy, where California is really the hub of this, to measure risk in a way that we've never done before. They say you can't manage what you don't measure. Well, we have tons of wildlands in the state of California, rangelands, forest, chaparral, especially in Southern California, that we haven't been measuring sufficiently. And so one of the things that we're going to be able to do with some of this money is to map on a granular scale down to even sometimes the individual tree level and identify where the fuel is that will fuel these fires when they do occur. So that gives you a sense of kind of some of the wildfire, tools that we will use that this bond measure will help us utilize. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So sea level rise, I think we like to call it a slow-moving disaster, but I don't think it's as distant as we think it is. We often talk about sea level rise in terms of 2100. What will we expect to occur by the year 2100? It sounds like a long time away. It's not as long as we think it is, but actually there are infrastructure projects being developed today in the planning process that by the lifetime, before those projects are paid off, they will be at risk of annual, semi-annual, frequent flooding. So if you can imagine if you're building your home and you're thinking about, I want to live here for the rest of my life, or just a home is one example, but the time frame that we're talking about is not as far away as people think. And I just want to give one example as a staff member for the Pro Tem coming from San Diego. The Los San Rail Corridor that goes from San Luis Obispo to San Diego is the second busiest commuter rail line, intercity commuter rail line in the country, behind only the Acela Corridor connecting Boston to DC. Many of you have probably seen reporting in the Los Angeles Times and others that shows the issue of bluff collapse. So we're talking about a commuter train carrying thousands of people per day that's at risk of falling into the sea. And this is a threat that we're dealing with right now. We're already having to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to ensure these bluffs, to protect them from collapse. So the threats that we're talking about from sea level rise are not as distant. As I've said this again and again, but I just want to drive that point home. All right. If we could move to the next slide. So as you can see, as that slide showed, nearly $1 billion in resources that will go to coastal resilience, to attack issues like erosion, to really help us prepare for this slow-moving disaster. So that was a brief overview. I hope that was helpful. Looking forward to the discussion, and I again want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Senator Portantino for bringing us all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. big overview. I got a couple more folks to introduce. We got Glendale Police Chief Carl Povolitis. We got Susanna Paris from the City of Pasadena liaison. We have Department of Insurance, who's also here. Do me a favor, if you're from a nonprofit, stand up and introduce yourself real quick. Yell it out.
Dan Brotman, Glendale Environmental Coalition.
Barbara Godo, Arroyos and Foothills Conservancy.
Tracy Elsterbrook, the Meadows Fire Safe Council.
Paul Rabinov, volunteers organized in the conservation of the environment.
Shona Ganguly with the Nature Conservancy, and my colleague Bill Christians back there too.
Carol Henning, Sierra Club.
Sandra Cattell, Sierra Club.
Nancy Oda, Tuna Canyon Detention Station with 2 board members, Jeanette Sturdivant and Kay Oda.
Kathy Armitage, Sierra Club.
Jonathan Amati, Sierra Club.
Diane Troutman, Sierra Club.
Hi, I'm Tim Brick with the Arroyo Seco Foundation and Hahamungna Native Plant Nursery.
Jason Casanova, Council for Watershed Health.
Caroline Craven, La Cañada Flint Ridge Trails Council.
Awesome. Thank you all the nonprofits for being here. The reason why I had you all introduce yourself so everybody knows who's in the room, so after the meeting, as you're strolling through Descanso, you could pair up and maybe come and learn something about each other. So thank you all for being here. We also have Guadalupe from Supervisor Solis's office is here, and we're going to go on to our next presentation. We have a presentation from the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, the incomparable, awesome Joe Edmonston. Are you going to come up here? Let's give it up for Joe Edmonston. Can I call you the godfather of open space? Can we do that? Sure. All right, the godfather.
You know, $5 billion is a lot. And I got to say, every single time Anthony says, Joe, we need to do this, it's not, well, you need to do it, it's we need to do it. He's never, ever failed to come through with the legislative support and the community support. And so, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. So, it was touched upon the different approaches. And I love our governor. Sometimes there are folks up in Sacramento who think that they know better. And every new administration comes in saying, boy, we're the smartest. We know what to do. And I think that comes with the territory, right? You get voted in by the people and you say, they knew to elect me because I know what's best. And many times they do. But in this business, Sacramento doesn't know best. Okay? We all know that's true. We all know that if you wanted to save Cherry Canyon, you wouldn't necessarily go to somebody in Sacramento and say, Cherry Canyon is the most important thing. Now, we've given, 4 grants for Cherry Canyon. How many of you have enjoyed and used Cherry Canyon? Okay, all right. That wouldn't have been possible had you had to trek to Sacramento and make that case. Okay? Georgia Major Wilderness Park. How many of you have enjoyed Duke-Machen Park. Okay? Right. That was another Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy project. That wouldn't have been possible had you had to trek up to Sacramento and fill out the grant applications and do the bureaucratic number. It's only possible because it was an initiative that was here in this community. And we can go up and down the state. What conservancies have done is mobilized the power that individual communities have, and the fact that you know best, in many cases, can do those projects. So the Arroyos and Foothills Conservancy, we are enjoying their work, not our work, their work. Nature Conservancy, Friends of the Los Angeles River, all of these organizations have received grants from the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and will continue to do so. What excites me so much about this? I've been doing this for 40 years. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Now, finally, there is enough money in this bond, in terms of the Los Angeles River, in terms of the Santa Monica Mountains, to actually make a difference. To actually be able to say, we can complete some projects. We can finish off a number of the things that need to be done. We don't always have to say, well, we'll do a little bit here and a little bit here, and then maybe we'll ask for another bond. We can complete so many wonderful things. And I want you to go to the webpage. It's really kind of simple, ULART, U-L-A-R-T, and you Google that, and it actually comes up, the Upper Los Angeles River Working Group, whatever we call it. Look at that plan. Look at that plan. It's beautifully displayed on the webpage. Every single one of those web pages has a beautiful project, and a project that can be implemented if we get SB 45. And that is just so exciting to be able to say, here it is, and it's not for the future. It's not some nebulous thing that may or may not ever happen, a plan that'll be put on the shelf. No, this is a plan that if you vote and the legislature votes for SB 45, we can, starting next year, begin to implement that plan. That's so exciting. So thank you, Senator Portantino, for giving us this opportunity and for being, we join the Hefty Author Club, okay? When Senator Portantino gets behind a bill, that's a hefty author.
So the way the morning's going to work is we're going to hear from our next two presenters, and then we're going to do Q&A. The microphones are coming to the audience. We're going to have hopefully about an hour for Q&A. We've got the Sierra Club here as well for the Q&A. We're going to go on to our next presentation from the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, our conservancy to the east, which has a big chunk of the San Gabriel Valley and then goes all the way down south. So we have Mark Stanley, the executive officer of the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, who's going to walk us through how they're going to approach SB 45. And so let's give it up for Mr. Stanley.
Good morning, everyone. I'm following Joe. That wasn't fair. A person I really admire in what he has been able to do with that conservancy. We're probably half as old in terms of our conservancy, but it was formed to protect the communities that are in the urbanized area in the upper portion of Orange County, as well as the San Gabriel Mountains that's now a monument. So pretty fantastic stuff. Pretty challenging in terms of what we need to do, given that much of the area is urbanized. There's even a challenge up in the mountains as well, in terms of how we need to sustain them and make sure that we protect our flora and fauna throughout the area. I want to thank the senator for this legislation. As Joe mentioned, this can create a significant change in the activities that we're involved in and what we can do to help our communities. You're going to see on the screen about 5 different slides that we put together. We try to highlight some of the major areas that we're involved in as a conservancy. And for most of you, I have mentioned that we cover, we stretch down to the upper portion of Orange County. So that means we're going from the mountains all the way down to the ocean, following the lower half of the Los Angeles River, and all of the San Gabriel River watershed is in the Conservancy's territory. Millions upon millions of people are impacted by what we do. While that creates a challenge, that creates an opportunity too for the support of activities like this. All the Assembly and Senate districts that we cover, and just getting the word out about how that's going to benefit all of us. And as we know, what we do here in Los Angeles actually impacts the world, and what they do impacts us as well. You've heard some statistics in regards to what's happening in our world today. It's not just happening in Los Angeles County, that's happening all over. So let's put our effort in to make this a better environment as well. One of the statistics that, these changes are not going to occur in the future, they're occurring now. And I just think we need to remember that these impacts are happening today. Sea level rise, I think it increased by, came up like 8 inches over the last century. It's more than double that within the last 2 decades. So these changes are happening, and they're being accelerated, and they're more and more exaggerated. So it's important that we have this type of legislation in place for us to help tackle that and spread the word to others that they should be doing their part in this as well. But in terms, so RMC, you see 3 different categories up there. Yes, we're about parks, we're about open space, we're about restoration down on the coastline. Did you know that 90% of our wetlands has been disturbed along the wetlands, along the coast? In Los Ritos wetlands has got one of the remaining pristine, just a portion over the 500 acres that has not been impacted. Stormwater capture and treatment, we work a lot with our partners. By the way, do I have a clicker? Do I have a clicker for the next slide? Okay, you're going to do it? Move to the next slide. Because we work a lot with our partners. A lot of what we do is about collaboration. We like to take these dollars and stretch them even further. So we work with Joint Powers Authority. A big partner is the County of Los Angeles in terms of how we can stretch dollars. In all the cities, over 68 cities are members of the RMC, and all of the unincorporated areas within Los Angeles County that fits within the territory, including that upper portion of Orange County as well. So we work with our Orange County partners too. But like I said, we like to leverage these funds. We like to take these dollars and match that against what the county has, match that against what the cities have, and match that against what nonprofits can provide to us as well. So it can go even further. You hear about millions of dollars, let's make that billions of dollars through our partnerships. We offer stewardship programs. Our stewardship programs are really important. Really, without the stewardship programs, we couldn't do a lot of what we do. I'll give an example. Our Los Cerritos Wetlands Authority, it's 500 acres. It straddles the city of Seal Beach and the city of Long Beach. My staff is not very big. We could not provide the stewardship programs and the education to the community without those stewards, without those people who are volunteering their time and putting in their effort to stretch the word of what we're doing and get people to understand that we're impacting our environment. Sustainability, resilience, a big part of this legislation, a big part of the focus, a big part of our efforts as well, because we understand if we can't be resilient with what's already happening, we're not going to be able to sustain that over a long period of time. Next slide. So a lot of what we do is very critical, that we take these dollars and we really create an impact. And we're able to help folks from their concept when they first come up with the ideas of creating better open space, educating the community, protecting our habitat. We're able to work with them from their initial idea. We're able to help them acquire land. We're able to help them with concept planning, which is probably the most challenging part for folks to get funding for, all the way through to construction and working with other government organizations. We also help them with that as well. Next slide. So that leans into technical assistance, which is also written into this legislation, a critical need within most of our communities. We have lots of communities that we would consider disadvantaged. They're vulnerable communities. They're very part poor. And they just don't have the resources to actually move forward a number of different efforts that's going to help all of us in terms of our environment. So technical assistance is one of those really critical components that, we see time and time again, people bringing their projects to us and they really don't have the technical background behind it. And we like to assist them with those components. So within our mission is also education. That's why we host summits, to bring folks like you together, to bring the community together so you all can engage with one another. Our resource expertise, we reach out to all our community partners, our nonprofit agencies, to bring them into the fold and help us move things along. And we engage the local leaders. I mentioned, over 68 cities are within the territory of the RMC. We engage with those local leaders. We engage with their planning efforts. We engage with our park and recs people. We engage with our public works people. We engage with the planning staff to move their efforts forward in the way that they see them. And I would say that's one of the biggest benefits of the conservancies. You have a state agency that's right in your community. You don't have to go up to Sacramento to talk to us. We're right here. We're a part of what you're doing. We live here too. So we're our local connection to all the state funding that is being provided for these different opportunities. Next slide. So resiliency is a big part of what we need to do. We need to be resilient. The impacts are already being made. We're already in the middle of it. Since 1970, we've increased the need for fire protection over 400%. I mean, these are some significant changes just in recent years. So our process for you to engage with us, you can give us a call. You can tap us on our website. We provide a call for projects. We like to hear your ideas. And what we have is agencies submit their proposals to us. We evaluate those proposals. We'll rank your proposal. We'll see if that meets the criteria within our mission. And even if you have a project that's on the edge, we will actually go out and talk to you about whether we can shape it so it can fit within the mission of our agency of protecting open space, habitat protection, and providing education to the community. We want to see things improve. Our perspective is not to reject what you do, but actually you provide something that actually helps our environment. So thank you.
Let's give it up for the RMC. Make some noise. So how many of you attended an Upper LA River Working Group meeting? A bunch of you. How many of you sit on the planning committee? A bunch of you. So you guys have worked diligently for the last 2 years to come up with a plan. We need the resources to implement it. So I'm very happy that Sarah Rascone is going to come walk us through things. So our final presentation, and then we're going to go to some Q&A and talk about what we can do and how you can access this money and how we can make this all work. So let's give it up for Sarah from the Upper LA River.
Hi everyone, good morning. As mentioned, my name is Sarah Rascone and I'm with a JPA of the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. We are called the Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority. So I work for Joe and all of you. And I'd like to say it's really remarkable when a legislator can legislate in Sacramento and then we actually see the benefits of that legislation. So Senator Portantino is doing just that with SB 45 and with the Upper LA River and Tributaries Working Group, which I'll be discussing. Oftentimes legislation is done in a vacuum in Sacramento, but we'll be able to see the actual benefits to Californians, stakeholders, residents, and constituents. So thank you. That's fine. So what brings us to the Upper LA River and tributaries? How did it come about? Basically, there was legislation developed in Sacramento in 2018, which created the Upper LA River and Tributaries Working Group. And this working group was tasked with developing a revitalization plan which shall address the unique and diverse needs of waterways and the communities through which they pass. And it shall be consistent with the County LA River Master Plan. So I'd like to recognize a separate effort by the county, Los Angeles County Public Works, which is focusing on the main stem, so the main corridor of the Los Angeles River, all 51 miles. Whereas legislators saw a need for the tributaries, so these really important additional waterways that really make up the watershed. You know, the river doesn't start at this 51st mile up in Canoga Park. It really starts in the mountains, and legislators did recognize that, which informed our study area. So the light blue shade you see on this map is the Upper Los Angeles River watershed, which is within the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy Zone. And these waterways, which are highlighted, ultimately became our primary study area. Next slide, please. Also a directive within that legislation was a prioritization on disadvantaged communities. So the map you see before you is of the tributaries overlaid with the CalEnviro screen, which is the state system for analyzing disadvantaged communities. The higher the score, the more rustic red, orange you see, the more disadvantaged a community is. I'd also like to recognize the working group, which is comprised of local elected officials and community leaders and appointees by the state, which were appointed by the Natural Resources Agency. I'm really thrilled to see a lot of our working group members here today, so I'd like to recognize you. They've been meeting since August of 2018 to help inform and develop this plan. If you're a working group member, because I've seen about 5, please go ahead and wave and tell everyone you're here. Yeah, thank you for your work. So our working group members have been meeting since August of 2018, and we've been hosting public meetings to really develop the framework and this plan. The priorities of the working group, next slide please, Vickery. The priorities of the working group became centralized around addressing topics such as access, health, mobility, resource conservation, habitat, water, recreation, and these 9 principles became entrenched within the working group's foundation and became part of their mission statement. And this really helped guide the framework of the plan and informed the mission goals and objectives of the working group. Next slide, please. So the original legislation only had a couple of tributaries, which were the Pacoima, Tahunga, and Verdugo Wash. And then subsequent legislation authored by Senator Portantino, SB 1126, officially added the Arroyo Seco as a primary tributary for study as well. And the working group, due to the CalEnviro screen and other factors, decided to add the Aliso Canyon Wash and the Burbank Western Channel for further study. However, I do want to note, other waterways and opportunities within this Upper Alley River watershed were still incorporated within the plan. We wanted to be as inclusive as possible. Next slide, please. So I'm trying to unpack all of the information since August of 2018 to you all in about 10 minutes, just so you know. And this map represents the historical locations of tribal villages overlaid on our primary study watershed map, which also became an important point that was brought up to the working group and they've incorporated. So during the first phase of our meetings, we did an overview of other documents that had been drafted over countless years. We know there have been other plans, so we did a comprehensive literature review, an inventory and analysis, gaps analysis, and the working group developed their framework, vision, goals, and objectives. Next slide, please. During our second phase, which is what you see before you today, the working group had public meetings to develop opportunity areas based on the needs, based on gaps and previous plans that had been done. And also part of this effort, we launched a web tool for community members and stakeholders to help us identify other opportunities within the watershed that can be realized. The web tool was live over 2 months, and we still have those opportunities available and mapped at the website that Joe Edmiston was referring to, which is upperalleyriver.org. Really simple. I'll make a pitch for our website again later. So through community meetings, working group meetings, committee meetings of the working group, and through the web tool, and the assistance of our NGO partners, which were instrumental in sending out the information to gather this feedback, we developed over 300 opportunities, part of the Upper Alley River and Tributaries Plan. And these opportunities are intended to provide multi-benefit improvements and incorporate everything from climate resiliency to improving watershed health, flood management and flood risk reduction, access and connectivity, educational and recreational restoration and resources. So we made sure that the opportunities didn't just serve one purpose, but they were multi-purpose, multi-benefit. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we had NGO partners. The following 6 NGOs, which always through a public process were able to help assist us. And they've done a great job over the past year throughout the first phase, second phase of the plan, and lastly, the final phase, which was our draft plan and commenting phase. In total, we had 33 public meetings, all open to the public, free and accessible, 14 committee meetings, 8 working group meetings. We have our 9th working group meeting where the working group will adopt the plan on March 12th. I invite you all to attend. And we had 10 community meetings, which we really made an effort as staff to diversify the geographic locations, everywhere from the San Fernando Valley, Sylmar, Canoga Park, Los Angeles, Pasadena, Burbank, Van Nuys, and Glendale, just to name a few. We really wanted to make sure that we visited each community within the Upper Alley River watershed at some point. And our NGO partners were really creative in their outreach, attending local neighborhood councils, block parties, movies in the park, supermarkets, you name it. We asked them to be really creative in their approach and go to where people gather. So this was during our first phase. This was our first round of meetings, just to give you an idea. These are the community meetings we hosted. Next slide, please. Our second phase of the plan development, which were the opportunities, we had 2 meetings. Next slide, please. And we decided to take input in every form and way possible. Everything from online input, written, drawn input, everything. We wanted to be as inclusive as far as getting feedback, and we wanted to be creative to be able to help inform the plan in every shape or form possible. Next slide, please. So this is just a slide to visualize and reiterate what I just mentioned, which was our ongoing community engagement during our first phase of the development of the plan, which was more so the research and inventory phase. Then we looked at the opportunities and decided on opportunities during the second round of engagement. And lastly, we had a draft plan, which was released in December. We had a public comment period, which closed on January 21st. And staff, again, made themselves available to get feedback in every way possible toward that draft plan. Not only did we have online commenting, we made ourselves available for you to come see the plan at our offices. We took written comment, letters, and like I said, online comments, and we had 2 in-person meetings, 4 technically, to gather feedback either verbally or in person. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, perfect. This makes up those 300 plus opportunities throughout the entire watershed. It may be really hard to read, but the significance is the scale of all of the opportunities that are multi-benefit, multi-purpose throughout the Upper LA River and tributaries. It's really exciting. It looks a little overwhelming, but what we do hope partners will eventually do, and stakeholders and community residents, like Joe said, that's the only way that these projects are going to be implemented, is if there is that community will and force behind it. And what we expect our partners hopefully to do once there's funding is to pick and choose these opportunities and help move them forward with partners and stakeholders as well. So, part of our plan, we also developed resiliency metrics, especially given the climate. And those metrics which were most significant with this plan included those of water, air, community, and habitat, and how these opportunities can provide new benefits. So given that we are in La Cañada and near the Arroyo Seco, closest to the Arroyo Seco than any other tributary, I'm going to highlight a couple of concepts that we further developed within the plan. Next slide. Next slide. So we looked at the character of the Arroyo Seco, what was the park accessibility, where was the most water pollution, what are the cultural institutions and centers for people now, and how can we better connect our open space to all of these and make the opportunities enhance what's already there or improve the existing conditions of. Next slide. And what we heard from the community in regards to the Arroyo Seco was the desire for connectivity, naturalization, more signage, and everything listed on this slide. So one of our concepts that we developed and looked closely was in the Arroyo, specifically the Lower Arroyo Park, which was naturalization of the Arroyo Seco and removal of concrete. So this is one of the really unique opportunities within the Arroyo Seco where with our consultants we worked to realize that concrete can in fact be removed and habitat can be restored to naturalize the river. Next slide. So then we looked at the various opportunities in and around the Arroyo Seco and analyzed those. Next slide. And then what we did is what's called stretch our opportunity and try to have the most optimal types of benefits with the surrounding area. Next slide. And this was the final boundary, so why not make a big impact and have a really large opportunity. Next slide. And then this is what we call a plan view. So with our consultant team, then a plan view was developed. And all of those opportunities along the Arroyo were identified either by the working group, at committee meetings, or by community members. Next slide. And this is a zoomed in version of that plan view. And then lastly, we have a rendering. Next slide, please. Oh, not yet, sorry. This is, next slide, but I meant the rendering isn't quite yet. This is existing conditions, again, with those different opportunities called out. And then next slide, now, this is what the Arroyo can look like once implemented. So I think it's really exciting, obviously, but we hope you do too. And the unique opportunity for river restoration, true river restoration and concrete removal. It's really exciting, and this is what all of those opportunities can look like, once funded and implemented, of course. But you have to start somewhere. Next slide. And then we attached climate metrics to this plan should it be implemented. So the largest impacts and benefits would be toward water, which we would have 205 acres of new permeable surface, new acreage of habitat, 223 acres of regional connectivity, and 2.8 acres of new and enhanced urban wildlife connectivity. Next slide. Another opportunity I'll briefly touch on is along the Burbank Western Channel. So the Burbank Western Channel is similar to a lot of our waterways where it's really constrained, there's a lot of development, and there's not much you can do with the channel, but we can do greenways. Greenways that can have really great benefits for carbon sequestration, physical health and trails, and even art. Next slide, please. So the opportunity we looked at is in Burbank and runs about a mile. It's an opportunity, like I mentioned, to help filter emissions from the 5 freeway, and it's a potential connection to the river, Griffith Park, and all of those areas that Burbank is near and along the Los Angeles River. So next slide. This is a rendering for what the Burbank Western Channel can look like. Again, we have what we're calling filtration forests with the additional greenery and vegetation, which can help offset carbon, and it can help also treat water quality before the water does enter south in the Los Angeles River. So we can do more stormwater capture with this opportunity and create more habitat specifically for birds. And as you'll see, as a recommendation by one of our working group members, we even added a mural to make it beautiful. Next slide, please. And the biggest metrics and benefits for resiliency would be from air and community for this opportunity. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the Verdugo Wash Ecological Connector. This is a really great opportunity to connect the Verdugo Mountains and is along the Verdugo Wash. Let's see. This is the plan view, as I mentioned earlier, and within our plan view, we found opportunities to daylight streams, create bioretention basins, new habitats, and wildlife connectivity. And this has also been mentioned by the Arroyos and Foothills Conservancy. So again, to show how we've been working with previous identified opportunities. This is, like I mentioned, the Verdugo Mountains to the San Rafaels. And this is how it can look like should it be implemented. So this is the rendering of the opportunity to create for connectivity, habitat, and have air quality benefits as well. Next slide. And as I mentioned, these would be the resiliency metrics should the project be implemented. We do have two of the 3 renderings available in the back of the room if you'd like to further look at them. That is a gist of what's in the Upper Alley River and Tributaries plan. Like I said, we closed our comment period January 21st, and the working group will be adopting the final plan, which will be available, we anticipate, before March 12th. And March 12th will be that adoption of this final plan, which provides, as I mentioned, over 300 opportunities for the Upper Alley River and Tributaries area. So thank you for your time.
How about that Upper LA River? Isn't that awesome? I loved all those renderings. Who thinks we should fund those? Who thinks SB 45 should be signed by the governor? And my commercial for this process is all of you work so hard on all of these things, we should take it from the piece of paper and make it reality, right? And that's when government works, when we do that. I'm so glad you highlighted the Arroyo, because I think Tim Brick almost died when the Arroyo was left out of the original bill. And so we put it in the bill just to save Tim Brick's life. So everybody asked me, why did I do the bill? And now you know, because I would have felt guilty if Tim went apoplectic anymore over that. So I want to thank Tim Brick for raising that. And Justin, the city manager of Burbank, is here. So we do have one city. Any other city managers? Oh, the new Bradbury is in the house as well. What? Where's Mark? Mark was here earlier. Oh, there you are. City of Claremont city manager. You're hiding. I couldn't see you. So we have some city managers as well. You all got the handout, I hope. There's multiple copies. I mean, $5.5 billion. And if you go down, my favorite two pieces is $85 million for the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy and $85 million for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. I get two of those in my district. That's my favorite part of the chart. So now we're going to open it up. Let's give a big round of applause for our presenters. And I want to give a shout out for the Senate caucus that flew down here. This is being recorded. Let's give a big shout out to them. What? Okay. They flew down. This is being live streamed and recorded, so it'll be posted on my state website, so you can share it with your organizations if you want. The materials are going to be posted. Some of you have asked for the PowerPoint presentations. I understand we have a staff member from Monica Rodriguez's office here. Where's she? There she is. Stand up. Because our councilwoman chairs the Upper LA River, so we have the chair's office presented as well. And now I know our panel in the Sierra Club are here. Susanna Reyes, my longtime friend. If anybody has a question, we have two microphones, David and Dominic. If you have a question for our panelists, just raise your hand and they'll run to you. David's running to you. Anybody else have a question? And anybody, there's 4 microphones. Share the microphones. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Sandra Cattell with the Sierra Club. But I'm speaking for myself right now. I am in the Santa Clarita area, and I love all the projects that you're planning in this watershed, but this watershed has all these wonderful earmarked projects. So I'm wondering what is going to be available for, say, the Santa Clara River watershed, which goes from Acton all the way down to Ventura and transverses desert, rural area, urban Santa Clarita, and rural, agricultural areas. That's my first question. And my second question is, other than the conservancies who will make their own decisions, how will projects be evaluated and what will the oversight be?
Well, a couple of it. The conservancies are spread around the state, so I'm just highlighting the ones that are in my district. I believe your senator is probably going to do a similar town hall to highlight the issues relative. So that's the goal. I think each set out and do this. I just happened to go first, and I know the caucus was excited because they're going to be reproducing these materials for all of the different districts. So each part of the state has its own conservancy. There's also money that's going to go programmed through the state, and frankly, it's all going to be locally driven. I mean, the point of this is to make it. Joe, do you want to have a comment, or James, you want to comment on how other districts?
So let me start with the oversight. Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy has a 26-member advisory committee, and we always get a quorum of them, and those are all locally appointed folks who go over an agenda item. Then we have a governing board, and we've got Sacramento represented, and then we have the state auditor, and
resources
agency. We have plenty of bean counters that make sure all the beans are counted. But the most important thing is we do have overlapping jurisdictions. You asked a question about Santa Clarita. Santa Clarita qualifies under the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy funding, but you also have, for the Santa Clara River, you've got the State Coastal Conservancy, a number of projects in that area. And then you have the Wildlife Conservation Board. So between, this is one of the good things about having a number of different organizations all pointed in the same direction. If we can't do a project, Wildlife Conservation Board can, State Coastal Conservancy can, and you've seen just last week the result of that kind of coordination. 3 different agencies all putting money in to get Hidden Creeks because of the local leadership, most prominently you, we got it done. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to see with SB 45.
Hello, my name is Marilyn Sparks, and I'm the Los Angeles County Commissioner serving the 5th District. My question is, it's noted in the handout on sea level rise and flood concern. Should be working and the National Flood Insurance Program to get being done, especially if we're widening water, and then especially in the areas of fire-scarred communities.
I am not intimately familiar of how much FEMA. James is writing that down to make sure we coordinate. The answer to your, thank you for bringing a look into that. Anyone else in the back? No? You all want to go walk to Sconso Gardens? Is that, Diana has a question? I bet it's on water runoff, no?
Hi. Well, first of all, I'm very pleased to see that it includes climate resiliency, specifically I'm chair at the Clean Power, the country's largest community choice aggregator, and power resilience is something that is really important to us, so I'm very glad to see that. But I'm wondering, within the specific allocations, how is the funding going to be allocated? I was heavily involved in the development of Measure W, the Safe Clean Water, and so in Los Angeles County now, several $100 million annually to address stormwater water supply. But at the time that the measure was developed, it was hoped that we would be able to leverage external funding such as that would be provided by this bill. And I just want to make sure that Los Angeles County, because we've gone ahead, I think the first county that is really undertaking a very robust opportunity to provide funding for local water resiliency, that we're not penalized because we have that local available.
From my, Joe, you contradict me, but typically when there's a project with federal funding attached to it, it uses of the practice of the Conservancy to like leveraging funds, dollars or other dollars, get a bigger. It's counterintuitive. The bigger partial funding usually are easier to do than the smaller projects with no funding. Did I answer that?
Precisely.
So does that make sense? Yeah, so you'll leverage those dollars to do.
It does. I'm concerned about that are not funded by the conservancies, but that might be by state OES agencies.
And dollars as well. It should be in principle. Whenever I'm putting the pieces, the first, that's the hardest third. Once you have the first project, you can get the second 2/3. So that is golden. Well, let's see if someone else has a question before you get your second.
Hi.
Oh, there you are.
Wendy
Introduce
Butts,
there you go.
LA Conservation Corps. So I'm here today on of the California Conservation Corps. Thank you for and the $30 million allocated to the California Conservation Corps. I want to put in a little plug. Those of you who know, maybe you don't, but the Conservation Corps are is to develop youth and give them work experience and job training on environmental and conservation related work projects. We are developing and grooming the next generation of workers. All of these projects will need people to maintain and operate them in the future, and those are our core members, we hope. Is there a possibility for more money that could be allocated to cores doing the projects? Many of these will be performed and with the conservation corps, I hope, but we have an to leverage our money we already have into these, give our core members work experience. We would love more money for that.
And you can correct me, but it's always been my experience, these things grow, they shrink. So I think this 5.5 billion will probably get a little bigger as the process goes, and we'll make a note of the Conservation Corps. And I believe several of the trails in Cherry were constructed by the LA Conservation. So they were Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy grant dollars that were programmed to the city of La Cañada, and the actual work was done by the Conservation Corps. So there's at least, I think, 3 trails up in Cherry Canyon that the Conservation Corps and the kids, the youth, it's a great program. So thank you.
And we constructed the Oak Woodland here Gardens.
You did that one as
so
well.
Ours, we have 30 million right now allocated to the CCC. We're looking for 100 and a 60-40 split with the local
right.
course.
Write that down. Wait, I got my checkbook. But it's a good point. In politics, there's no room for shy people. Don't. Sarah, Susanna Reyes, our Sierra Club. Let's give it up for the Sierra Club.
Hi, I just want to express gratitude for the ongoing support for the bill. Thank you so much. But from a Sierra Club perspective, I just want to express as well that a good bill and that we're still looking and doing our full analysis of it. But what I really want to emphasize is this is all about climate change. It's the urgency of how we're going to be tackling climate change and looking at how we can be more efficient and really address the impacts on disadvantaged communities. Sarah, you mentioned that. Thank you so much. That we and take a look at of the wildfires on water quality, our watersheds, our forests, because they capture carbon in the air, the economic and work development, the warning systems for when there is a fire is important so that then communities can work in hardening their areas. And from utility standpoint is at microgrids, distributed energy storage, and really looking into clean energy for that. Because after all, change is about of emissions. And if we're looking at those projects, really, I just really fully emphasize the impacts on the communities, reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, because as Thunberg said, our house is on fire and sometimes fire.
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you for your. And I think I saw Edison in the house at some point. I know at least one of the utilities. I also want to make sure not everybody here lives in my district. Obviously, some of you live in Senator Allen's district and Senator Stern's district. So obviously, this conversation as you talk to those two senators. I mean, Senator Allen's staff, the last page, Tina is the staff point person on this. So make yourself, obviously introduce yourself to my staff, but make sure you communicate directly as well with Tina from Senator Allen's staff, because, this is a statewide effort. Obviously, we're focusing on my district here today, but it's going to impact the entire state of California in a positive way. Did you have another question? She got your question? Oh, hey, Paul.
I'm going to take Senator Portantino's cue to not be shy, and I'm going to put in a plug.
Well, tell us who you are.
Paul Rabinov. I'm here on Volunteers Organized in Conservation of the Environment, VOICE. I'm going to put in a specific plug to a piece of property which is not all that far from here, the Verdugo Hills Golf Course. It is in the city of Los Angeles. It's been championed recently by Councilmember Rodriguez. Thank you very much. It is a property which has a history going back to being part of the Latuna Canyon Detention Center, which is a very sad moment in our country's history. It is presently threatened with the development of somewhere over 200, and although it's not included in the ULART study, I'd like to have it at least going on record that it is a piece of property that we firmly believe is worth preserving as open space.
And doesn't the county have a piece of money already dedicated to it
Yes,
as well?
Supervisor Barger has allocated, I believe it's $5 million towards the acquisition of this property.
Yes. Duly noted, and obviously, you know, through the years, my office, going back to the assembly days, we've been sending letters to, you know, try to preserve it as much, and it's great that the councilwoman's office is on it. Duly noted. Who else has a question? Oop. Frank? And then we have one in the front too, Dominic.
I've got the mic.
There you go.
You know what, I'm with the city of Glendale. Before I start with my question, I want to thank you, Senator. In the Assembly and the Senate, on multiple issues, you've come up with solutions and ideas, and it's just great to have you around and serving our community. On the fire prevention issue, the $75 million to CAL FIRE for equipment and grants to local agencies. So basically, CAL FIRE would be the sort of grantee, and then
Right.
Burbank, City of Glendale Fire can...
It would be the clearinghouse.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
In the front here, David.
Hi, thank you, Senator. I'm Shona. I'm also a resident of the district in Shadow Hills, and personally concerned about insurance for fire and things like that. But
Commissioner's office here. So
exactly.
Make a love connection after this, all right?
I mean, climate change insurance is an important thing, too. Two things. One is, very quickly, that I want to make a point that since this is going to be, I hope you will all members and have your friends, members saying this, and get the word out and amplify SB 45. You can do. You can, make sure that they want this. There's polling to show that there is an appetite for this kind of bond and for bond. My question is about, as we know, there's a governor version. It doesn't include conservancies, and I'm curious about how you're reconciling that.
Well, that's the whole point. There's a philosophical difference between should we program the money on the local level or shouldn't we? The reason, I'll be honest with you, the reason why I have all of the local advocates in this room is so A, you educate yourself, B45 does, you educate yourself on what the other do, and in my mind, the biggest difference is what we are going to do is empower a local, locally driven projects, because as it's been said, each one of these concerns represent from all communities. So I think that's the better way. And so trying to governor and is the better. I believe we got hours out of it because we're prepared. This becomes the plan. That'd make a difference. And then
Grega with Friends of the
It's on a kayak.
Well, I first pushing this heading to LA River and all opposed. Question is field remediation of concrete really we've seen forward in projects is when we want concrete removal, then comes with that. How can we help and get happening in April, so we'd love to figure out a way to get the word out to mobilize people, like Shona was saying, tweeting and sharing on social media. We bring a lot of river stewards to the event, so figuring out how we can partner and make sure that we're pushing this along.
I noted the issue. We're going to make sure we bring that up. As I said, this is going to get hopefully bigger. What you can do, if the fact sheet, the list of organizations that support, if your organization is not there, start bringing. My competitive, Christy jumped in and said she volunteered the LA River. So they were all good thing. It's a good yet, so we'll go to you. Hasn't had a note opportunity. Go ahead.
Happy to help, Senator. From Los Angeles, member Paul Koretzin, what amount in support would a city solution be helpful from Burdale and South Pass, etc.?
I don't think any formally take a position, but I think the idea and have the city of LA very helpful. So all of you, I don't know how long the assembly haven't really much. You know, the Conservancy. I believe that they're going to fold in. The more the more use the vehicle. Continue. What's going to happen is going to come. Will support if you add this. We'll get folded, get bigger, and then we'll go to the do. Other questions? And our house.
Yeah, and, my question: rail guards on its, and I'm wondering there's going to be a Senate.
Do it. I promise you that somewhere 47 doesn't, you know what I mean? It's the hope, but that's how project legislature. Now we're pretty pure. Hope we stay there. I think again, all of the environmental groups working collectively on one vehicle gives us the strength, because the more the wave is big enough and everybody's in there, then nobody gets to leverage it at the last. Does that make sense? The more votes we have based on the purity of the less votes we need based on the impurity. That's a straight answer with a little bit of poetry. I like that one. Who else? Well, I guess you'll be our last question. Unless anybody else? No? All right.
I noticed that a lot of money has been allocated for urban greening. Well, I live in a neighborhood where there are a lot of mature trees, which are very important resources, but these big trees kind of lift up the sidewalk, and there's a program in the city of Los Angeles right now to repair sidewalks so that people won't trip and fall on their faces, and so that people in wheelchairs can go down the sidewalk, etc. So I hope that part of this money will work on how to save these trees, how to retain them, and how to make maybe the sidewalks safe for the trees rather than making the trees safe for the sidewalks, because usually the idea is just cut them down and replace them with tiny baby trees, which take years and years and years to mature and don't provide habitat, et cetera, et cetera.
James wrote it down. James is taking copious notes to go back. You all know Kip, right? Kip in the Pro Tem's office. James is going to report back to Kip all of these good ideas. Anybody? I don't want to cut anybody short, so if there's another question. But I'm going to tell you a funny story about a tree removal. My favorite story when I was on the city council, we had a guy who had come to us and wanted to remove a protected tree that was shedding pine needles into his pool. And you know what his argument was? I've lived in that house for 50 years and I planted that tree 49 years ago. I have a right to cut it down 49 years later. That was his argument. And we said no. We said just clean your pool with a thing and don't cut down the tree. But I thought it was a pretty interesting argument that he said, I planted it, I get to kill it. And we said no. Again, I want to give a big shout out to the caucus. They recorded this. They live streamed it, so if you want to see it again or share it, all of the nonprofits can share the link on your system, which I think this was a healthy conversation. Let's give a big shout out to our presenters. If you haven't familiarized yourself with the conservancies, you've got the two head folks here. Make sure, again, what's the rule takeaway? Don't be shy. If you heard somebody from a nonprofit that had an intriguing name and you don't know who they are, you know, go ask them to walk the gardens, because part of this is networking. And, you know, there's that old saying, if we go alone, we go fast, but if we go with others, we go far. So if we all work together, collectively, we can make a great parks bond that will help with climate change, help with our pet projects, help with our trees, and help with our environment. Again, a big shout out and thank you to my staff for putting this on, as well, all the folks in the red shirt. Thank you very much. And all of you for sharing your Friday morning with us in the 25th Senate District. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your weekend. And Descanso Gardens, thank you.
State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.